2 o'clock. Welcome to the Mashpee Board of Sewer Commissioners meeting for August 4th. We didn't meet on the 28th because of a screw-up, so we're making it up today. We won't meet again until the third Thursday of this month, which I don't have a calendar from. It must be
It's the 25th.
28th. Be the third Thursday. The members today here are Meredith Harris. Al Toole is not here today. Catherine Castaneda.
Thank you.
Okay, Chad Smith, Phyllis Sprout, and Joe Lyons. We're in the McCoy meeting room in Mashpee Town Hall. So I'll call the meeting. First thing we do is we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to have a moment of silence for those hurting from the recent floods. Okay, do we have any public participation today? The only extra person in the room says no. We have have to review and discuss, if needed, the July 14th minutes for approval. Susan gave us a copy. Do I hear anything?
I move that we accept the minutes from July 14th.
Second.
Those in favor, or any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. That took care of that. Now we have some old business, and this is the key to the whole town speaking the same language. So have all the department heads reviewing the rules and regulations that have been drafted for the sewer operations in the town of Mashpee. Ray has been talking to different department heads, and if he could let us know what's happening, we'd appreciate it. Why don't you just move up to the table with the mic? There's nobody else here today.
Too many papers.
Well, I'll give you a place to spread out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all the new members. We have met, and it was, I thought, a very enjoyable experience for me. I hope it was mutually beneficial in understanding our respective roles, okay? So I'm very pleased to be here today. As I indicated to you, Mr. Chairman, I was going to push this out to the town department head, so I went out to the complete list. I did ask them to try to respond back to let me know if they were going to be commenting. I received 3 responses back, and I've talked to a number of other department heads, but 3 responses back, and one was from the Board of Health, one was from the assessors, and the third one was from finance. So assessors is not going to be commenting, but they are just forwarding it to their board. Finance is not going to be commenting, and the Board of Health may comment. So I won't know that for probably another week, what, if any, comments they may be. So I'm prepared today if you wanted to go through it and had any specific questions based on the information that I had sent out. I do have a list that I could run down for you and try to make it as painless as possible to be able to go over it.
Well, I think we ought to leave it open to any questions that anyone has, but also do understand something about the way things get done in small communities and towns like this. Everybody has an opinion, and you have to give everybody the opportunity to review it and express it. But in order to get anything done, what you do is you create something as a document, and you bring it forward so that they have something to be objective with. And that's what this document is. They can look at it, they can read it, they can pretend to do something, or they can get involved. If they get involved, the town will evolve and have a very good document. If they don't get involved, the way they do is the selectmen just vote to accept it as is, and they don't get a choice about anything. Then their departments are bound to what it says in the document. So we don't want it to go that far, and we do want Ray to smooth talk some of these people that may be required to review this, because like on the Board of Health,
Right.
there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that has to be part of the rules and regulations, because they're responsible for the health of the people in this town. And the sewers are a key to that. So they will get involved, they will comment at some time in the future, but we have to be, we have to get them involved, is what it amounts to. And if they don't want to get involved, then they get put involved by the help of the selectmen. So, did anybody want to discuss any portions of the rules and regulations, or?
I appreciated the time to be able to review. I'm confident in the documents moving ahead as written at this point.
I also appreciate the time to review. I do have a question about the review process, though, if I may ask, the town review. At what point does legal counsel get involved in the review process?
Once the board is ready with a final draft, that's when we would put it before town council.
To give you a little confidence, it has been reviewed and approved by Chatham's legal counsel prior to us even using their document as a draft document for this town. So
Can-
you will see that it's all,
I
it's
know.
legally been past that.
I do have a
test.
question, though, that applies to the Chatham one.
All right, we'll ask it.
If you would refer to the definitions page,
Okay,
section 1,
yeah,
What page is it, please?
page
Definition.
4.
Okay.
I mean, I read the whole document a
Yep.
couple of times, but something stood out to me.
Yep.
And after reviewing it, I
Yep.
checked the Chatham one, and it has the same thing.
right.
Section 1 refers to the Clean Water Act that, is relevant to what our goals are and our purpose are here in Mashpee. On the other hand, I went through the whole document to look where it refers to that piece. And in neither the Chatham Rules and Regulations or ours does it get discussed at any point. So I was thinking maybe it's a relic from previous versions. I'm
You're
curious.
saying it's a relic prior to the current version of the Clean
Prior to
Water Act?
Chatham even adopting it.
Yeah, but you're saying that Chatham, which is our document, is Chatham's document, so.
Yes,
don't-
I checked the
Okay.
Chatham one. And they have the exact same thing, and it's not referred to anywhere else in the document.
And what does it say? What is the contradiction you find?
It's a definition only. So
Yeah.
usually when you have a
Okay, the
definition,
definition is,
when there's a definition, it's usually used at some point in the document.
yeah,
But it says act, or the act, shall mean the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, also known as the Clean Water Act, as amended 33 U.S.C. 1251 at sequence, and the regulations promulgated thereunder as amended from time to time. So if you check all the other definitions,
can we
they,
stop right there for a moment, because you're asking a question about that?
yeah,
That exists. It's part of the state nomenclature.
I know, yes.
So all we're saying is we have to abide by that state nomenclature. There's 100 other things that we probably have to be advised to as well.
Okay.
But I don't
Just-
see
I
a
was just-
conflict if it just refers to something that exists in the state, period.
Well, that's
It's like
fine.
saying Joe drives a Toyota. Big deal. Doesn't
Well,
mean anything
I'm just
significant.
Well, I'm interested to hear your opinion because I found that
Yeah.
curious. It's not referred to anywhere else in the document. That's all, period. All the other items, all the other
Yeah.
definitions are used throughout the document. I figured legal counsel will decide whether this is an issue or not.
Yeah, and I guess I'd have to agree with Joe on that, in that even if it may not necessarily be referenced in a current version of this, it could
Okay.
easily be referenced in any amended version.
Okay, well, that's a good clarification for me to know.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
And believe it or not, that's something I would forget to do if we ever amended it. I'd forget to put the definition in there.
Okay,
Well, one of the things you'll also find, the more you get engaged, is the more disingenuous all of the Massachusetts laws, regulations, and everything else are, okay? They're academic exercises. Their intent is good. And if you
Oh, I don't
walk
doubt
away just succeeding with the intent, fine. Don't get buried in the detail, because it'll bury you.
oh, I don't
You know,
doubt that.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying from a long time of filing for things with the state.
Mm-hmm.
It's political, it's not technical, and if you put them all up to a fine mirror, it's some attorney's opinion. That's all it is. There are very few facts
Okay,
in anything that the state publishes, unfortunately. No, the intentions are there, and some people spend their lives learning how to speak that speak. And in reality, they don't bring the facts forward and make decisions on facts. Okay? It's
interesting.
always a distortion of the facts that they make decisions on.
oh dear.
And you gotta struggle with that. So if they say you've gotta be in conformance to the Clean Water Act, we gotta be in conformance. End of story. Don't go in any deeper. It'll bury you. You'll drown.
It just doesn't say it.
I have a question. This is on page 7, and Ray, you had made a comment under section 3, and it says that the parcels need to be connected to the sewer system within 365 days. That's already in the document. And then your comment is, we assume that this has already been approved. What do we need to do about that?
Well, it actually hasn't been approved
Okay.
by the town in any form that I'm aware of. As a matter of fact, the flow neutral bylaw that was passed recently in order to get the SRF loan had a reference in it specifically that said for mandatory connections that it shall occur as written in these documents, this document. Okay, so even that deferred to the sewer commission. For what it's worth, one comment that I would make about that now, because I've really given that a lot of thought, you're building a sewer system. You don't have one. There's going to come a point in time when point A connects to point B and you start up the plant and start up the system. If everybody waited a year to hook up, you can't do it. You can't finalize the contracts. You can't test the system out. You wind up losing warranty time on all equipment and appurtenances. So I guess my point is maybe the commission would want to consider something less than that. And I tried to look beyond just where we are now with a main plant that's just getting built and a collection system getting built. But what about the future, any future sewering that may occur in town? Everyone in that sewer service area, wherever it may be, is going to have advance notice in the form of years that it's coming. And even when it does come and starts to come to fruition, it's going to take a year, at least a year and a half to plan it, another 6 months to a year to design, and then you're going to have the actual implementation and construction, which is going to be a couple of years. So there's plenty of time to prepare for that connection to take place. So to me, a 90-day time is reasonable when that point in time comes, but just something to the board to consider. A year is a long time.
Thank you.
In past projects, what has been your experience? Is it half a year? Is it 3 months?
90 days.
90 days?
90 days is usually sufficient. And it kind of goes along even along the lines of something like a failed septic system or something like that. The question is, how long do you want to let it go?
Question, are you aware of any town that actually made a restriction of 90 days, like Falmouth or Chatham or Yarmouth or anybody on the Cape?
Falmouth.
Falmouth did, okay, so
Yes.
there is precedent of it.
I'm sorry?
There is precedent.
Yes. And I can forward a copy of that to the
Okay.
board, to the commission. All right?
Maybe we should consider putting that into the R&R.
Yeah.
Could you come up with some wording for it?
Yes.
Wouldn't it just be an editorial change that says take place within 1 year, take place within 90 days?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so it's just an
Well, it
editorial.
would have to
It's-
say 90 days from the completion of the connection to the plant and all that.
That's
There'll
what
be
it-
a complicated sentence with that.
Yeah, and
It does say that.
Okay, no, but I'm saying when he rewrites it.
Yeah, it is, believe it or not, it is actually complex because
Okay.
there is a day when the connection will be available to a home. The question is it available for service? You know, meaning while we're building this system, there'll be a connection for every house, but you wouldn't want them tying in yet because they can't, because the pipelines aren't finished. But there will be a point, and it'll, elsewhere in the document, it refers to that time period that exists now, where it says from the time that you are notified. And that would probably be the appropriate language, all right, at which time the town formally notifies you, it's ready to accept.
Then you have 90 days.
Yes.
Is there any kind of deference for the people in the town that need more time, whether to procure funding or they have an existing project going on at their house that interferes with the installation of a sewer connection?
There are usually several considerations that you may have to take under advisement, namely that there are times when it can be a financial issue. There are times when it could be a physical issue. In the wintertime, be a good example. When it's snow and it's frozen, that's not a time when you tell somebody they got to make their connection, okay? So there will be instances where you'll likely have that option.
Thank you.
I have another question as well on page 7. Again, this is in section 4, and it says determination of wastewater flow. And it says that the water meter data provided by the Mashpee Water District. And your comment, which I didn't understand, this is my question, can you clarify? Your statement was, should this be a multiple of water use?
Was that my statement, or was that a Weston and Sampson statement?
Oh, I don't know whose statement it was. It was a yellow sticky on it.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so it's the yellow sticky that's at the bottom of page 7.
Right, yeah, that wasn't mine.
Okay.
That was Weston and Sampson's, and in my opinion, this is sufficient because there's a number of different ways to calculate flow for a property. And this is by far the best way to go, is when you have actual flow meter data. It's for your house. It tells you what you've been using every year. It doesn't get much more accurate than that, as opposed to trying to go with Title V flows or something like that. So as far as I was concerned, it was fine.
There's one key thought here. We still have a number of people in town on their own wells, even though they may be on a street that's going to end up with sewers. So we may have to create a paragraph to cover that issue that says they will pay the average water rate, whatever that may be, because we won't have any input for their disposal.
Believe it or not, it is actually possible to put a water meter on a well. But but the current operation is the Mashpee Water District. And I don't believe that they would come out to do that. They don't want to incur the expense of the meter on the one hand and the ongoing expense of reading a meter on the other hand. But it doesn't mean that it can't be done and wouldn't be doable, okay? And I'm only
We're not
mentioning,
in the business of creating more
More work.
conflicts. We just say the town shall charge you the average price, period. In one sentence, it's done.
And they can do
you're
that
done
too.
with it.
Yes.
So let's look at it that way rather than making a problem out of it.
I think you'll probably have that opportunity more so than this document, because this here was only basically trying to measure flow for wastewater purposes, as not for billing purposes. You're going to need to do a rate study at some point prior to this system going online. And that would be the place to do the rate study. They're very comprehensive, offer multiple options on what and how to do it. And I think they would probably be able to deal with the private well issue in a format that gives you options as a board, as a commission.
We have some precedents here where the town has proceeded with the idea, in fact, negotiated with the water district for information they use for billing. They would in fact, do our billing.
Correct.
So that should be part of this document as well.
Yes.
Any other questions to the R&R document?
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so on page 8, there were 2 comments in the section C, the non-residential development, and it says, the question is about needing to require a variance. And it's stated in both B and in section 2B. So section 1B, section 1, and section 2B, it says that we would require a variance from the sewer commission. So, and it says, the sticky said, is it necessary to require a variance?
I think it's, in that particular instance, the variance had to do with one of the preceding items that had subject to A1 and A2 below, all right?
Yep.
That was actually a direct quote right out of the town's Board of Health regulations.
Okay.
And so it, as a matter of fact, it even made a mention of the word both A1 and A2 below, but there was no 2 of them. There was only 1. So I guess my point is there that the Board of Health had it in there as a reference to if you're sewered, it'll be the Sewer Commission, and if you're on a Title V system, it'll be the Board of Health for any decision on anything like that. But as far as having a variance or not, that's not critical. The way the flow neutral bylaw is written, it pretty much lays out what you're allowed to have, and there are no provisions to be able to overrule that, okay? And please understand it's otherwise known as the growth neutral bylaw, because once a town makes a determination to go to sewering, you have just removed the limiting factor to a property. Before, they were limited to what a Title V system could do, all right, and what was going to be allowed on a Title V system. Municipal sewering can almost generate as much wastewater as you want, okay? So it's a limiting factor that it's removing, and they have to be careful of it.
Okay. Another clarification is on the next page, section 11. It says that the town of Mashpee's sewer bank allocation and permit policy, and the comment was made that it's not sure that this is accurate.
Okay. I know you're not reading my comments, I'm pretty sure. What page is that?
No, it's page 9, section 11, at the bottom of the page. It says, again, I guess I'm looking more for what the sewer commission will be required to do in terms of helping to support the document. So at the bottom of page 9.
Oh, okay.
it says, Town of Mashpee Sewer Bank Allocation and Permit Policy. The sewer commissioners may, from time to time, adopt policies, procedures, and protocols not inconsistent with these regulations. So
Right.
that seemed clear enough, but then the comment that was attached to it says,
Right.
we're not sure that this is accurate.
Okay.
What's not accurate?
The town doesn't have a sewer bank. And it's not like a regular bank, obviously. A sewer bank is a means of achieving credits for development purposes, all right? And literally, when it's employed by a community, they're buying that privilege, if you will. There's some kind of fee associated with it. You start getting into things like transfer of development rights and things of that nature, but that's all part of a sewer banking initiative. The town doesn't have anything at all like that now. So this would not be applicable for Mashpee. So Section 11 in revision would just read policies, procedures, and protocols as a title for Section 11. And then says the sewer commissioners may, from time to time, adopt policies, procedures, and protocols that aren't inconsistent with the regulations. But you do not have a sewer bank.
So it's just another editorial change.
I'm sorry?
So it's just another editorial change?
Right.
Yeah, okay. I think rather than going through this so much point by point by point, can we just have your input about what you feel would be the most important things for us to address at this point?
As you may have seen on the draft that I had sent, for all intents and purposes, the changes are relatively minor. I mean, I had to make adjustments for a couple things, push the table of contents on its own page because it was listed wrong, change some words like modifications to amendments in order to be consistent with the document. But I think a couple of issues would have been the mandatory one-year connection requirement, and the sewer bank was an important one because when you reference a sewer bank, it has a huge meaning that actually goes outside the authority of the commission and gets into planning and zoning, what have you.
One comment, though, on that. That sentence includes something else which is very important. The Town of Mashpee Sewer Bank Allocation and Permit Policy, it says. We're gonna change things in the future. We're gonna have different permits in our policies,
Right.
you know, so you can't just blow something away. The fact that they had the sewer bank allocation in the same sentence as the fact that the sewer commission may, from time to time, adopt policies, procedures, and protocols not inconsistent with these regulations. It means we can change the regulations as required or as needed for construction or political reasons or whatever, financial reasons. If there's a good reason for it, we can go back and change things. That's all it says. I wouldn't be so nervous about, you know, whether there's a sewer bank or not. Who cares? At the moment, there isn't. Maybe there will be in the future. We reserve the right to change our policies.
Yeah, but I think we're just saying that it's an editorial change to just take sewer bank allocation out and leave in permit policy.
Well, I would suggest to you that the person who wrote this is a hell of a lot smarter than me, and possibly you, although you're smarter than I am. There's a reason for doing that. If you're ever gonna have the sewer bank allocation in this town, we may want this in here. And now we gotta go back and put it back in because you took it out. It doesn't hurt anything to have it there.
Are we all reading
No, it
off
just
the...
says, we reserve the right to change these policies. That's what that sentence says. And that's
Okay.
what the lawyer is gonna tell you.
Okay,
It doesn't matter what it is, we reserve the right to change it.
fair enough.
Are we all reading off the same copy that has Ray Jack's commentary noted with his initials and sequential and number?
I don't have your
That's,
initials on my copy.
that to me was a very helpful document because it actually, a lot of these questions we have, some of the questions you had, Meredith, I had the same ones, but I also noticed that he had made the notation under it, so I said, oh, that's what he's talking about. I found that copy of the document to be particularly helpful. I just didn't know if we were all looking at the same one.
I have both of them, and this was the one that the second one with the yellow stickies on it were the ones that I had questions about that I didn't feel had been clarified.
Next time I'll bring a bigger screen so I have both.
I have them, yeah, I have them, I just felt that these were questions that I had that just needed to be clarified.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
One comment I think I would make overall, there was a comment in there regarding the potential for putting a pretreatment document together. Pretreatment programs are very, very expansive, okay? They're generally reserved when you have industrial loading on a sewer system. An industrial loading that's significant enough that it has the capacity to damage the treatment process or have a deleterious effect on the wastewater plant itself. And sometimes it can get to a public health issue with respect to life and limb. I've actually experienced that in my career in wastewater practice. So, but I'm just letting you know that that's normally reserved for much larger systems. And to try to put a pretreatment program together is a very, very big document with virtually no meat because there's no industrial loadings here.
Not needed at this time.
Right.
Any other questions?
Yes, for Ray Jack again.
Okay.
Is, on page 17, it has to do with the depth. It says, in general, the sewer shall be deep enough, and then the comment is define depth.
Right.
Page
That you may wanna-
17?
Page 17, yes.
Yeah, that you may want to consider defining a depth. However, I guess my comment would be this. The way the statement reads at the present time, it says that they are required to ensure that the main is protected, and that if it cannot meet the frost requirement, then it has to be insulated. And all of that would have to be approved by the director or the commission itself. So that being the case, there have been numerous instances in my career where sewers have not gone down a specified amount. You want to have latitude to be able to install sewers. Sometimes they would be shallower. If it was going to cost the town $50,000 to go down 6 inches on a main, I would never recommend that. I'd say you leave it where it is and protect it. My point in the response is that it provides that mechanism that they'll have to protect it if it's insufficient for the frost depth. Because the frost depth is a moving target. It always is. Every single year it changes. Some year it's only a foot, other years it's 3 feet.
What is the target minimum depth if you were to advise based on your experience?
As a general rule, you try to put pipe type of utilities, water and wastewater, down 5 feet. That would be the normal depth that theoretically it wouldn't have to be insulated and would be able to survive a frost.
All right. Thank you.
Got any more, Meredith?
Yes?
Go for it.
One more.
Keep going.
Page 47. It's in the sewer pipe testing. And it's really just a clarification of terms. It says that the LUI shall test the first section of pipeline, et cetera. And then the comment was, so the initial section shall be should not be less than 500 feet and not more than 1,000 feet of pipeline, or it says, or between MHS, and I don't understand what MHS is.
Manholes.
Oh. So
And-
does this make sense, that statement that's there?
Yes, and the reason being that, given that these are regulations, and if I was a contractor and looking at it literally, then that means you can only test if you have that distance of 500 feet. But what if, and think about a manhole and think about a gravity main. Gravity main starts at a higher point, starts going lower. If it changes direction in elevation, all right, or laterally changes direction, it requires a manhole in order to affect that change. So in theory, under the testing requirements, you've got to have a 500-foot run. On some properties, you may not be able to have a 500-foot run. It could only be 150 feet, and then you have to have a manhole, then a 500-foot run. So this is just saying that way, if you're going between manholes, you're testing every section of pipe, regardless of what the run is.
Is that doable?
What's that?
Is it doable to test
Oh,
that
yes.
frequently?
Yes,
And it has to be done then?
yes,
Okay.
yes. The pipe you don't test is the one that's going to leak.
Okay. Those are all my questions for now. Thank you.
No. Okay.
Anybody else?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
I asked my question.
All right. Well, looks like we're making some progress there. Jack, can you give us an update on the sewer construction and finance scheduling?
Yes, sir. If I may.
Certainly.
Excuse me. There's just a few slides that I have here that are primarily for the benefit of new commission members and/or members of the public that, were just kind of tuning in as to some of the background, if you will, on why we do what we do and what you're doing for all intents and purposes. And then I do have that update at the end of this piece here. So, okay, ecosystem balance, all right? This is where everybody wants to be, all right? This is dreamland that says that humans are going to be able to reside appropriately within the environment that they live. So we have these cats, and they happen to be my cats, and that's my front door. But they are natural predators, there's no doubt about it. And when you put them outside, they can be an eco disaster. They'll chase and eat whatever they can. It just happens to be their nature. So this is what you're trying to achieve is ecosystem balance. But this is why it's tough to achieve, because there's another predator, and that's us. So balancing that human need and the environmental need has historically been a problem, and it's not going to get much easier in the future. And it's a costly endeavor. It's also characterized as social responsibility versus environmental responsibility. And when we deal about the social responsibility, if we were to think about a river flooding, if the river floods and doesn't cause a loss of life, then it's not considered a major incident. If it causes a loss of life, there's probably going to be a dam built, okay? So the environment will take a backseat to a human need in that case. This is just a projection on what the world populations are going to look like. So considering there is limited space on the planet, it's going to be more and more difficult. When I use the term climate here, I'm not really talking about climate as I am talking about the natural environment. So this is where it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, many times this is what it becomes. So it's problematic, and as you can see, it really is a large problem to try to solve. So we get into land use planning because, quite frankly, that's how we got here. Build out is always considered a point where the land is consumed as intended. And many people cheer that on because they figure, well, beyond that point, nothing else can happen. That's not the case. That's when redevelopment starts. And if you thought development was intense, wait until you get to redevelopment, all right? because that's when you start to change the existing use. The parcels have been consumed, but then the density generally is going to increase under redevelopment. Places can go vertical, and the population increases as a result. Land use planning includes multiple agencies, so it's no individual's fault, all right? There's a lot of decision makers here. You have selectmen, town meeting decisions. Some of the boards involved are planning, Concom, Zoning Board of Appeals. Agencies would be federal agencies. They write a lot of the rules and standards. Same thing with the state, with Department of Environmental Protection. On the regional level, we have the Cape Cod Commission, who has their rules, and the 208 plan, as it's commonly known, is an outcropping or a requirement of the Federal Clean Water Act that requires that they have a plan for remediating some of these issues, okay? Wastewater Collaborative, that's a regional entity. I happen to be on that commission as well. Then at the local level, you have committees and commissions and many others that factor into the equation. But the point is that they're all making decisions all of the time, every day. So, what happens when we start developing to the point where it becomes an environmental problem? You can have source water depletion. We don't yet have that on Cape Cod because we have a sole source aquifer. But if it was a surface water source, we would be much more susceptible to that. But the point being is that our demand can outstrip our supplies. And this is not just a wastewater issue, all right? We managed to outstrip our electrical supplies, so we have rolling blackouts. We outstrip our natural resources, whatever they may be, with respect to forested areas, what have you. So it's becoming an increased problem across the board. So impervious surfaces are a big part of the problem with respect to Cape Cod. It's almost kind of unique to Cape Cod because with a sole source aquifer, it has one source of recharge and one source only, and that is rainfall or precipitation in general. Snowmelt is also a form of recharge for the Cape. So the more runoff that you have, the less recharge that you're going to have. Contamination can affect public health and the ecosystem health. Wastewater and on-site systems, and this is my view, are generally inadequate. They focus generally on nutrients and not contaminants overall. Municipal systems, however, usually will treat a wider range of contaminants. They're upgradable, cost-effective, and I think that this becomes an important point for everyone to try to consider in the future. And it is my view that when you have a municipal system and you hook a house up to that system, you have taken 100% of the wastewater from that property out of the environmental equation. A septic system does not do that. An innovative alternative system does not do that. They are still just charging on-site. Alternative systems can include enhanced on-site systems or in situ systems, and a good example of an in situ system would be a reactive barrier or a PRB. It's called a permeable reactive barrier. It's where you either dig a trench line for an underground water flow or plume of contamination and try to intercept it with something. So in the old days, they used to dig these trenches and actually fill them in wood chips down the groundwater table. Today, there are injected materials such as oils and emulsions that they will pump down there that can be easily done in the future as well. So do they work? Yes. Like most, they have a limited application, but they do work and can work. Stormwater can contribute organic and microbiological loads. And even under the organics, you have a host of them. When we call something organic, we are basically saying that it has carbon in its molecular structure, whatever it may be. That's what makes it organic, is the carbon. But when you mix these compounds, then you create different types of organics. So you have what's known as an SOC and VOCs. SOCs are synthetic organic chemicals. VOCs are volatile organic chemicals. Volatile gases will drift off into the atmosphere. That's where the volatility comes from. But these are the kind of things that stormwater can do. Believe it or not, the lines that get painted on the street, the paint that is used today is relatively environmentally friendly, but it didn't used to be. It had a high SOC content in past years, okay, so it became problematic. Some of the methods to be able to handle stormwater, CSOs, are combined sewer overflows. Those are generally reserved for the larger cities like Boston, where stormwater goes into its own piping system, and during emergencies, it can actually be pumped right into the plant, a wastewater plant, and then discharged from there. Detention ponds, you see detention ponds and vegetated swales around malls, shopping malls. They too have a benefit, even when it comes to removing something like nitrogen, because a vegetated swale can actually have a plant uptake of nitrogen. Constructed wetlands, you don't see them too much. They're relatively expensive, but all of these have an intent of either eliminating and or mitigating some of the discharges that will occur from stormwater. So these discharges, whichever category they're in, stormwater or wastewater, they do affect groundwater, surface water, and wetlands. You can have regular types of contaminants, such as microbiological contaminants and organic chemical contaminants. And then you also have the nutrients or elemental contaminants like nitrogen and phosphorus. Wetlands are always considered nature's purification system, but the conventional loading of today's society has dramatically exceeded their assimilative capacity to be able to uptake the nitrogen and the phosphorus. 50% of all the nation's wetlands are gone. That's not just Massachusetts, all right? And for the most part, they're pretty much gone forever. That occurred on the Louisiana Swamp Act of 1849, 1850, and 1860. And their reasoning back then wasn't that long ago, but their reasoning was they were bad lands. That's how they were characterized. Why? Because they have mosquitoes. What was the real reason? They wanted to develop those regions, all right? The fact that it's a wetland meant one thing. It was close to the water, all right? That's where you wanted to be. So unfortunately, 50% of the nation's wetlands are gone. Surface water, when we talk about them, you have water bodies and water courses. So we have lakes and or ponds as water bodies, water courses, rivers and streams. You can have freshwater or marine being saltwater environment. The life cycle of these systems is obligotrophic, mesotrophic, and eutrophic. And almost by definition, moving from one to the other, the first one is a young lake, second one is a middle life lake, and the last one is a dying lake. What usually causes that is when it starts to fill in on a natural cycle, not a human cycle. So naturally, when that lake or river starts to fill in and sediments start building up, it gets shallower and shallower. And as a result, it affects its ability to sustain life. So eutrophication in the natural world takes thousands of years. In the human world, it takes a decade, all right, to achieve. They're hydraulic connected with groundwater through influent effluent systems and interflow. And in a case like this, what you're looking at with the ponds in the town, they're visual representations of the groundwater. It's no different than going down to the beach, digging a hole in the ground, and you hit water. That's what the kettle holes actually are. What's important to remember about them, though, is that what goes in stays in there. They have nothing feeding them. They have nothing leaving them. Okay, so they have problems associated with just that alone that make them unique as opposed to any other type of lake and or pond. For groundwater, you have drinking water contamination and ecosystem damage that occurs through that connectivity between it and the water that surrounds it. And I'm almost done here. Some of the problems, funding is insufficient funds for all the needs that you have. So you have your needs versus what you desire versus what you may be required to do. And at my point right now, I hope that the needs are in the desire stage as opposed to the required, because that's when DEP comes in and literally starts enforcement actions. If it's not broke, don't fix it. A lot of people, for whatever reason, just don't believe that it's the problem. And if you go look at some of your ponds, you can see why they feel that way. They look pretty. Even an algae bloom looks pretty. Oh, it's a beautiful green. It's toxic, but it looks pretty. And we relate a lot of these things to our senses, okay? Our sense of sight, okay, and things of that nature, how it smells, what have you.
Fortunately, we're past that. We're past the denial. We have a public that is aware of our pollution now in our water systems.
And believe it or not, that puts Mashpee in a unique place, because I can tell you for a fact, not everybody's there. So, in my opinion anyway, things like this, in order to actually resolve them, it takes much better approaches than what we've been coming up with in the past. Communication is probably the biggest thing that any town can do. Command and control technology versus technology-driven solutions. I find this interesting in that our regulatory environments that we live in are almost exclusively command and control. This is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to do it. And this is the level you're going to achieve. And this is when it has to be done. It's very specific. All right? And it literally is a hammer over the head approach. A technology-driven solution is dramatically different, where you're trying to encourage technology to develop for a problem. Under the Clean Air Act, they had a really good example. It was called pollution credits, whereby you had all these factories that were polluting the air. You could tell each factory, you've got to achieve this level. And you can't go crazy with the level, right? But they'll do it, no matter what the cost. Or you could tell them that they could be creative and trade their credits off to another company, and a bigger company might be able to do a lot more environmental benefit for a greater impact on the environment, all right? If given the chance with the technology. So you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. We keep giving out the fish. Quality of life, community character, it's what everybody wants. It's where we want to be. We value that highly. But it's not an accident. It's something we have to think about, plan for, and put into effect. Tragedy of commons, I went over this with the selectmen on awareness and education. The term was coined by an author named Garrett Hardin in the 60s, and it's an Aristotle philosophy. Basically says that people take care of least that which they do not own. So the problem in Mashpee, you don't own the pond. The ponds are like the public space, but you don't own it. You don't take care of it like something that you own, all right? So that's where it kind of gets lost. I remember a person trying to convince me to put trash cans along a nature path. And I said, why? And they said, because it's dirty, because they're throwing their trash. And I said, think about who's throwing the trash. Who's on the nature trail? Naturalists. I said, you've got a naturalist out there doing their own damage, all right? You would think they would know better, but. So, other options, you can purchase a ticket for the Titanic, which is to do nothing. Or if you already have it, rearrange the deck chairs and do little. But whether the issues are natural or man-made, no matter what they are, and whether they're real or perceived, there are definitely going to be impacts, and we're already experiencing them. And our responsibility is to try to plan to minimize or mitigate those impacts, right? And that gets into a little technical thing when you get into minimizing something versus mitigating something. And I won't get into that now. So it's broken, but we can fix it. Successful resolution for just about anything when it comes to a municipality. First, it has to be technologically feasible. Then it has to be economically viable. It needs to be scientifically defensible. And lastly, and this is the most important, it has to be politically and socially acceptable. If it's done right with the first three, the last will follow. And I've seen that work both ways. When the first three fail, or one of the first three fails, the last one generally fails. If the first three are successful in their application, the last one will be as well. This is just what your new plant processes are going to look like. The wastewater is going to be collected out in the system, come from a point, and then it will arrive at the plant where you're going to have your influent pumps, influent versus effluent. Influent is water coming into a plant, effluent is water leaving a plant. Then it's going to go down to a mechanical screen. And then it's going to have a grit unit, which has 2 grit removers there that the mechanical screen will take off things like floating solids. The grit unit will take out some suspended solids. Then it's going to go into the reactor tanks. And you see AAA up there. That's because the tank itself is broken down into 3 distinct zones. It starts out with an anoxic zone, then it has an aerobic zone, and then back to another anoxic zone. So in the first and last zones, you're depriving it of oxygen. In the middle zone, you are actively oxygenating the water, okay? And that's because you have different bacteria that are going to be doing different things in order to achieve denitrification as a process. Then at the end of that is where you have your filters. You have ultrafilter membranes, which are going to be end of the process. And I do have that with me, but it's outside at the moment. I just wanted to show you that. After that, it'll go through UV disinfection, so you're using ultraviolet lamps, and the water is passed through those lamps. And I do want to clarify something about UV disinfection. It's not as critical for wastewater as it is for water. Water usually has a cleaner product going through that lamp than wastewater does. And the only problem with UV, the ultraviolet ray has to hit the object. So if there's something that gets in its way, like a suspended solid, it blocks that wavelength, all right? So it is possible for organisms to survive ultraviolet disinfection. Then after that, it goes on its way out to the ribs or the rapid infiltration basins. This is where we are. You have 3 contracts. You have the treatment plant contract located at the transfer station, then 2 collection system contracts, one north of 28, one south of 28. The one south of 28's more than 2 times larger than the one that's north of 28. We've already completed the advertising for all 3. We completed the pre-bid meetings where contractors had the opportunity to come in, investigate things, take a look at sites, have questions answered. So that was all completed. We received the filed subbids. So under Mass General laws, these are the trades for a building. So the subbids were for the plant itself, not for the collection system. And you have various trade groups such as plumbing, HVAC, electrical, piping, things like that. And we received those subbids, did a canvas on them, which means they were organized and inspected to make sure that they met all their requirements. That list was then given to all of the general contractors who had the copies of the plans. The general contractor is required to pick their sub-bidders from that list. They will do that, and then they will submit their bid, which will be next week. So the other bid that we received, other than the sub-bids, was for the Collection System 2 contract. We received that bid today. Next week, we have a bid on Tuesday and a bid on Thursday. And that'll be the end of the bidding process. So by Thursday, I'll have a fair idea as to where this is going to be. If we go to construction, if the bids are viable.
So you're saying the primary bids will be in by the 12th? You set up there?
9th is the last bid. The general contractor bid is next week. And
The 9th?
yeah,
Why did you say the end of next week? Or did I interpret that incorrectly?
only because we have 2 bids next week. One's on a Tuesday, one's on a Thursday,
Oh, okay,
okay?
all right.
So by the end of the week, they'll be done. It's mandatory that we have a contract executed with DEP, meaning the SRF program for the loan, no later than September 30th. So if the town's going to do these projects, my expectation is that that'll be by mid to late September. I will be bringing the contract documents to the commission for your review. I'll have the engineers here. They'll be able to walk you through it, or I can walk you through it, because they're very complex documents, all right? When you start spending $54 million, it's not a 3-page contract. Then completion of the projects expected in 2024. Each of the respective contracts has a bid timeline, or rather a construction timeline, but they're generally over 2 years and just short of 3. So our next steps, I indicated this with the Board of Selectmen preparing for a watershed permit or not. When DEP was down here, meeting with the town, the selectmen specifically, the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection was here, and the regulations aren't on the street yet. They're coming out this fall, that they're proposing. Bottom line is that the towns will have to decide whether they want to apply for a state watershed permit, which will be pretty much in accordance with the plan that the town has on file now of 2015, for how you're going to handle this problem in the future. One of the differences are that 2015 is at least a 25-year plan. The watershed permit, 20 years. Unlike the conventional plan, the watershed permit also has a number that you have to achieve of reduction of nutrients, and that is in the nitrogen category 75%. So it gives a specific timeline, a specific value that the town has to meet, or tell everybody to replace their septic systems with innovative alternative systems within 5 years. So those were the options that came out of that. In my view, the town's best option is a watershed permit. I'm going to presume that we'll be able to play well in the sandbox with the adjacent communities, and I'll get into that in just a minute, but the state is looking for a Pleasant Bay model to happen here. Pleasant Bay have multiple municipalities make a conscious determination to take a collective approach toward the issue. So they're looking for Mashpee to do that, and then you have the adjacent towns of Falmouth, Sandwich, and Barnstable. Now, for the next steps here underneath, finalized regulations, we were just talking about those, and then you have a phase 2 review. It's on the agenda, and if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I can walk you through that on this presentation. I prepared one. It's up to you, though.
Well, I just have some questions which I had illustrated as new business, which is a continuation of exactly what you've laid out here. But it answers the question as to how critically we can move ahead, how fast, and how much is it gonna cost us. So there are a few trigger points. And the very first one, I wanna know definitively, on the request for bid, is the original construction, the primary first stop construction, going to include the tanks for all 4 processing lines? In other words, the volume would be large enough to handle the 400, what is it?
480,000. 480,000.
480,000 gallons. Will those input tanks be part of the original contract on this unit, on the transfer station plant?
No.
All right, excuse me. How many will be?
2 out of 8.
2 trains out of 8.
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Internally, how much of these, you're using the word trains, I was calling them lines, will there be 1 or 2 operating lines included in the original setup?
If we look at each train, they're concrete tanks.
No, stop that. The tanks are in the ground. I don't want to talk about the tanks anymore. I want to talk about what makes the tanks work. We take liquid out of the tank, there are pumps. Line 1 has a pump, line 2 has a pump. Then it has the filters, et cetera. Which, are they both going to be complete in the first quote? Both line 1 and line 2, so that they can process?
Yes.
Okay, so originally then we're gonna have the equivalent of 240,000
No.
gallons, no?
No. For each 120,000 gallons worth of flow, it takes 2 of those. So the plant right now, under the base bid, is for 120,000 gallons. They're going to put 2 tanks in.
There's a little misconception here by me and I think historical information. that we were going to have 4 lines. Each line would process 120,000 gallons. Is that an incorrect statement?
4 lines of 2 each,
2 what each?
2 each tanks. I know we're talking about the same thing in a
I know
different
we are, and I gotta
context.
get the language straight, because I'm still feel like we're not doing what we said we'd do and what we need to do from a technical point of view, but you may be just saying it in language that I don't understand.
Okay, there will be, in the original plan, under the base bid, the full plant for full capacity is 480,000 gallons.
Right.
To achieve that, your very first 2 have to be what's known as redundant tanks. You can't just have one. If you have one and it fails, you have no plan anymore.
Well,
So
you're
you have to
saying
have
one
2.
tank again, don't use that word. It's
Tanks.
each line requires 3 tanks at the front of it. After the filter, they have to go through 3 tanks
No,
and then into the plant.
no.
So what are you gonna do, build a double-sized tank so it'll take 2 lines?
No, no, no.
Is that what the problem is here?
On the exterior of the plant, the pumps and equipment are going to be physically in the plant.
Correct.
The wastewater is going to enter these tanks from outside. all right,
The
from
tanks are
exterior.
outside under the ground with lids on them.
Yes, the tanks will be, yes. They're going to have lids on them. They will be underground structures, and they'll be covered, all right? But they are concrete tanks that they are going to dig holes and place these tanks in, or build them, I should say, form them. So for the basic design right now, for 120,000 gallons, 2 tanks are going to go in. That way you have the redundancy. If one fails, you switch to the other. In order to have more process for
All
the
right,
plant,
excuse me, I gotta understand what you just said. I think what you just said is, the incoming will use 2 holding tanks before we get to the process tanks.
no, these are the process tanks.
Well, you need 3.
No,
You need 3 to process.
no. Each
You
tank
need
has 3 separate
Aerobic,
zones.
anaerobic, and aerobic.
They're separate zones. The fluid transitions from the entrance zone
Yeah.
into the middle zone and then into the last zone.
Okay.
It's a transition that occurs
So you're
laterally
saying
through
there's
the
just
tank.
one big tank with 3 zones in it?
I'm sorry?
You're saying it's a big tank with
Yes.
3 zones in it?
Yes.
But you're really saying there's 2 big tanks, each with 3 zones in it. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now I'm getting an understanding.
Yes. But to help you with the question to begin with,
Yeah.
all right, because I see that your concern
Yeah.
is going to be capacity for the plant.
Yes.
And doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Where the town was just what I described. Base bid, 2 tanks are going in, gives you 120,000 gallons a day flow. There were alternates added to the contract. And under the alternates, there were 12 alternates, and there are various things. One of them being a carbon contactor, which is for the odor control. The plant itself is going to have an odor control system that's going to be a biological odor control system. The alternate is for a backup to that, or an adjunct to it, either way, for a carbon unit. Being that this is in a residential area, I consider that to be a critical device, all right? And so that's number 1 on the alternate list. The other tanks that we were talking about, they're number 11 and 12. And we had to accept anything ahead of it before we get to that, from an alternate perspective, under a bid process. It says that this is our most important, we can accept this, this, and this. But to get to 11 and 12, you got to accept everything before it. I moved them up to number 2 and 3. That means the most important is the carbon unit, the odor
the what?
control. The most important unit is the carbon unit for odor control, all right? Then comes the tanks, and there's 2. The alternate number 2 would then be putting in another 2 tanks next to the first 2. And then alternate 3 is putting in the other 4 tanks next to those.
yeah,
So that's where you would achieve full plant capacity.
right.
The dollar value on that alternate is
Yep.
$400,000 for the first 2 tanks in the alternate, and $800,000 for the other
Right.
sets of tanks in the
Right.
alternate.
$1.2 million.
So they have been moved up to the head of the class,
Yeah.
if you will, so that they will have the opportunity to determine whether or not the town wants to do it and can do it.
This process, if we do that, allows us to do what has been perceived around here as a quote-unquote "a new Phase 2." In other words, we can
Yes.
look forward to picking up other areas in town that would help the impact to the freshwater portion of the town's pollution problems.
Yes.
All right. So I am just concerned as to the $54 million. I want to know, as of your opinion now, what are we going to end up with the construction as it's perceived now for quotation? How much is going to start up? You're saying 120,000.
120,000 gallons. That's the
Gallons.
base bid.
Right, and that would do roughly double what we'd planned to do to start, because it was about half of that. We had 480 units or something. Each would have 150 gallons, 120 gallons a day. Actually, that line should handle up to 1,000 homes,
Yeah,
individual customers, let's
yeah,
call it.
like I said,
And
from
we're
a,
only going with 480.
from a tank perspective, you have to have 2 tanks, no matter what.
Yep,
Even if the flow is only 60,000 gallons, you wouldn't
Yep.
be allowed to have just 1 tank, because like I said, if that
Yep.
tank fails,
yep,
you got nothing.
understood.
But everybody's flushing the toilet,
Yep.
and you can't do anything with it. So, my hope, and I am cautiously optimistic, we'll know in a week what the bids come in as, all
Yeah.
right? I'm cautiously optimistic that the bids are going to be good bids. Not quite as optimistic that we'll be able to take the alternates with respect to the tanks and have them done at this time, but that's what I believe would be the best approach, is to do them now, because they are underground.
Have you expressed that opinion to the select board, and the management of the select board?
Yeah, I don't know that I did specifically on that, because I don't think
Okay.
with the select board, we got into a detailed discussion about the plant processes,
Right. Okay.
all right? But we will know by next week.
I have a question with regards to the redundancy of the first installation. Is that redundancy, we're talking about 2 separate tanks and lines, as you illustrated, so if one goes down, the other continues and it continues to operate. Does that redundancy continue into future phases? Do we have to have side-by-side systems for each section we add to town? Or once we have multiple, we already have that redundancy and we don't have to keep scaling, essentially double the capacity?
Well, it depends, believe it or not, it becomes a regulatory issue when it comes to design. So if you have a chemical feed system in there, presume for the sake of argument, you're going to disinfect with sodium hypochlorite, all right, bleach. And that is for a public health issue, let's say. The state considers that critical. Are you going to be allowed to have 1 pump? No. You must have 2. For everything that's considered critical in a plant, you have to have redundancy with it. You have to have 2. It not only facilitates a breakdown, but it facilitates maintenance of whatever the issue may be. You can take 1 pump off the line while you're repairing it, or you can give it a break and switch them, alternate pumps and systems. So that's why they do it. I do believe in that. It's necessary.
Thank you.
I think there was a valid question, though, and it's hard for anybody to understand. We need redundancy in the first zone because if one thing fails, you got to have a redundancy. But now you have 4 lines, 4 processing areas, basically, and each one 120,000 gallons. we don't need a redundant for every single one of them. The redundancy is in the system, maybe with 2 more 120s instead of 4.
Yeah, the way
Is
they.
that true?
Yeah, the way they'll characterize that is, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, that the flow for the system, under the present system, doesn't equal that, all right? So is it possible to shift, if one tank went down, could you shift the entire flow over to the other tank? As long as that answer is yes, you've accomplished the redundancy,
Or other tanks, plural.
right? Right.
And you, same thing as with your filters. You need 5 filters. You don't need 2 for each line. You need 4 for the plant to operate. You need at least 1 spare, so that anything goes down, you can swap it out.
Yeah, you're actually going to have quite a few filters.
We end up with 6 or something,
I
so we
wish-
can be flushing one all the time.
I wish I brought it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 6 foot tall, about 6 inches in diameter, and they'll come in a cassette form. So there'll be multiple units in a single cassette
How
that
many
gets
units are
inserted
in a cassette?
in the tank. Well, it depends. It could be as many as 54. So they
How
can
many
scale
gallons?
up, they can
How
scale
many gallons
down.
per day then goes through one of these?
That's what it's going to be dependent on,
Right.
all right? Is what the flow is and the quality of that flow.
Any other questions?
I have a question, just for clarification. When you first started talking, that was a great presentation, thank you very much. But the question that I have, initially you started talking about the problems with contaminants and nutrients. And our focus has been primarily removing nutrients. So where does this leave us in addressing the contaminants? Or is it not an issue?
With the plant, it leaves you in a very good place.
Okay.
Those membranes that I talk about are capable of removing a virus. That is small, all right? On a scale, it is very, very small. Bacteria are large by comparison. It'll remove bacteria, some viruses, okay? It can remove smoke. So there's a lot of contaminants that it's capable of taking out of. Some more than others to varying degrees. It all depends on how big the molecule is or the organism.
Does it not depend on the collection system at all? Or this is all just going to be assumed in the collection system that we're building?
Yeah, the collection system is going to deliver raw wastewater to the
Everything just
plant.
flows downhill until it gets through the filter.
That's it. It's,
But you
it's
think
all going to be raw.
Everything then?
Everything,
It's all going to be raw.
whatever's in it, gets all the way to
That's
the
it.
filter.
It does.
The big stuff gets screened out,
Got it.
anything floating through. But, yeah, to understand that, you have to understand that what they are plastic. And plastic is porous. So if you have a plastic bag and you put something in it, you have to understand, air can still go through that plastic bag. Fine, fine materials can get through the walls of the plastic. They make plastic of a good quality so water won't go through it. But it has to be ultimate quality to prevent anything from going through it. And that's why if you're gonna freeze something, you should really double bag it, because one thickness
gets
isn't
through.
enough, it'll suck frost right through it in the freezer. So
So
this
that's
is.
what I've been doing wrong.
Huh?
So that's what I've been doing wrong.
Yeah. You double bag things, or you roll it in plastic wrap, so there's at least 2 or 3 layers around the hot dog or the hamburger, whatever, and you can take it out a year from now, and it'll still be good. If you do one wrap in 3 months, it's all frosty, so. But that's the filter, the nature of filter. It's, they extrude these, basically, I think they're straws, if my chemistry is.
That's what they look like.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
individual straws, that the porosity of it is so fine, it'll actually keep, I think you draw through it, right? So all the junk stays on the outside of the straw.
Correct.
And then what you do is you shut off the system and you basically hose it down, and all of the junk falls to the bottom, and we end up pumping that junk over to this site.
Yeah,
that the
that's-
filter is.
The normal cleaning process for those membranes would be a chemical cleaning, and one would be sodium hypochlorite, which is bleach, and the other one would be citric acid. But in both cases, okay, acids are pretty powerful, and that literally dissolves much of the material that may, form on the surface of a hollow tube fiber.
Don't get nervous when he says acid. It can be lemon juice. That's acid,
Yeah,
okay?
citric acid.
Yeah, citric
Yep.
acid.
Yep.
We had a question, I think, that one of the members,
about the question.
maybe the only member of the public that showed up today. Please introduce yourself and use the mic if you have a
Okay,
question.
I don't need the mic. My name's Alexander Jackson.
Yeah,
I live in Cotuit Bay. I've
Okay.
been there for 10 years. Okay.
Just so the public can
All right, so I've been there for 10 years, and I was chairman of the board for 3 years, and so I'm involved. Catherine is my good friend, and she's responsible for me being here. My question is, I'm trying to understand the bidding process. You've talked about the bid, and you've mentioned alternates. Do I understand that the bid is for all 8 tanks and all the redundancy, the extra pumps? How many pumps are going to be needed? No, okay. So phase 2 or 3 is going to be for after the first 120,000, after the first 2 tanks.
Yes.
So we really don't have a timeline on that, and is that going to be part of this bid, or is that going to require new bidding?
That would require new bidding if we didn't take the
Okay,
alternate.
that's my question. That's all I wanted to understand. Thank you.
And I
Thanks,
think,
John.
for the board's purpose to understand that water and wastewater plants are highly technologically advanced today. And that technology moves very, very quickly. I would never suggest that if you were not planning to sewer a geographic area for 7 years, 5 years, I would not suggest that you buy the pumps, the motors, or any of the equipment associated with that. The membranes, none of it. The tanks, yes. All right, because they are concrete, they're not going anywhere, it's not going to change, it's nothing technological about it. All the rest of it, that can change dramatically. And you want to be able to take advantage of any new technologies, process upgrades on treatment and things of that nature. Not to mention the warranties themselves. These things are not cheap, all right? You buy pumps and motors for water and wastewater plants, they're expensive. And if you just let them sit for 5 years, your warranty's long since gone. All right, now you start it up and it fries. What are you going to do?
And technology changes.
Exactly. Okay, so for the tanks, that's one thing, all right? To put them in now makes a lot of sense to me. But for the rest of it, I wouldn't equip each tank with all the process units, all right? You do that as part of the collection system as you start doing it. You can just include that cost in there. Okay, we're going to have a cost for
The
plant
sewer
over here.
commission will be involved in trying to determine what our next phase and investment will be, because that is not within the contract management which the town is doing, okay? We're supposed to watch create information and help the town make decisions. We're not the contractor. He represents the town as the contractor. Ray does. I mean, Ray's the head of at the moment, our engineering effort. So we have, 3 engineering firms and Ray Jack. Next, any other questions? John, you must have a question.
I don't have time today.
And we have another guest in the back here. Who?
Mashpee TV.
Oh, you're with the TV, okay. I didn't have any other questions. Does anyone else? Well, Ray's got the floor and at that computer.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I have a question. When are we going to see an overview of the Phase 2?
Phyllis, we're gonna help create phase 2, okay? So there is no overview yet. That's the issue. We're gonna get phase 1 built, and while we're still here as a commission, It's a job of the commission now to evaluate the areas that would become Phase 2.
Well, that's what I was talking about.
All right,
Thank
so all we have to do is get a hold of a map and look at all of the position where the houses are. They're gonna be quote-unquote our customers, because for every person in town, they put about 9 pounds of nitrogen a year into the septic system. All right, so it's strictly by houses, and the geographic position of the population will drive it. We've got the main areas already in Phase 1, that are most congested areas. Now we can move up, I can't say the names of the streets, but further north and further south. We gotta get Pirates Cove is another hot spot. So that'll probably be part of 2. And up around Santuit Pond will probably be part of 2. And around the town hall and the immediate area of here, probably part of 2. But the other side is we've got to start thinking of the Wacoit watershed. All right, now, this facility, or an expanded one at this site, can handle all of the sewer processing necessary in this town. We may just run a pipe down 151 from over by where I call it Dino's, because that's where I buy my pizza, somewhere in there, a collection point and a pipe over to the transfer station for processing. And that would take care of the shed, the watershed on the west side, which is primarily above by John's Pond and coming through John's Pond. So that'll be the issue that we should, commissions should spend their time working on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if you like, I'm prepared to give you a preview in that at least there's the plan from 2015 that
Yeah.
had Phase 1 through 5,
Yep.
and there was a request that went to the Board of Selectmen from the commission last year on looking at what was called 2A through 2E. And I am prepared to show that to you. It will give you a basis to start as far as considering.
Yep. Could you lay it out on one piece of paper, where on the left side, in a column, are all of the streets involved in the original plan? And on the right side, are all of the streets involved in the quote-unquote new alternative,
No.
Phase 2?
No. That's going to be a big effort if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for,
Well, I'm looking first for your technique
Yeah.
of evaluating it and giving us a summary so we can discuss it,
yeah.
splitting it.
Would you
Getting it all present to everybody to see on one piece of paper.
Well, I can't put it on one piece of paper, but
Yeah,
I've got it right now.
okay. Could you do that? Because that's the issue.
Do you want to see it?
You have it right now,
Yes.
side by side?
Pretty close to it, yeah.
Show us what you got.
Yeah,
Show
please.
us what you got.
And Joe, I'm not quite sure I understand your question, because how different is that from the map that had come out a while ago? Is this what you were going to be talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, our approved plan is not
No, no, I
Phase
kn-
2 on the map.
I understand that.
Okay,
This was
so I want to
something-
see the approved plan and the new Phase 2 as a comparison, and then the sewer commission can discuss it and make a recommendation.
Agreed,
Okay.
agreed. Okay, thank you.
Yes?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Okay, this is your original plan. The black line represents town boundaries. So that's our boundary with respect to Barnstable to the east, Falmouth to the west, and Sandwich to the north. Then we have the various phase areas. So you start out with Phase 1 through 5, and this is this is right out of the original plan here. Phase 1 is the pink areas. So right in the center of the screen area here, and let's see, where's everybody looking? Okay, you're on both of them. Right here is the area that we're looking at right now with Phase 1, okay? This area up here is the town hall area, which was not included in the current contract. But this is the area right here, and this pink line that comes down there, where that green spot is, that's where the plant's supposed to go. So that was the Phase 1 area. Then Phase 2 is the blue areas. And as you can see, they're kind of all over the place. This is a southern piece here, another section over there, here, 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 up here. Then Phase 3, areas in green. So they're predominantly on the east side. So you have them going across this area here, and then down south below Mashpee River, and a little piece right there. One little piece all the way up here in the corner. Phase 4 is in yellow, and it represents some fairly large areas, if you will. And I'm going to be getting in, especially this area like down here, all right, and this area up here. I'm going to be pointing this out in a minute. Then Phase 5 is the orange areas, and of course, I'll be talking about that in a minute. And then you have this over here, this orange area, all right? They become important, as you'll see on this. So this is the original plan, the way it was, 5 phases over a 25-year planning horizon. This is what was presented to the Board of Selectmen in 2021. So here you still have the municipal boundaries, the original plan the way it showed. Then you had 2A, which is the area south of the collection system that we're building. Collection system we're building is right here. So this area is obviously directly south from that. Notice, however, that what was presented did not include this area over here. And there's a reason for that. That's not in Mashpee, that's in Barnstable, the other blue area. 2B, this is a Phase 3 area, but it's being accelerated in this modified version here. But as you can see, it is directly north and contiguous with the Phase 1 area here. So now you have a north and south contiguous component to the areas, if you will. Then we have 2C. This is contiguous with northern area for Phase 1, all right? And it presumes that that northern area for Phase 1, meaning that's that pink spot right there. This only becomes contiguous with the system if that gets done, the piece in the middle. But the presumption at that time was that that area was going to be included in the Phase 1 project to begin with. Now,
Nobody lives there.
right. So this area here, all right, is a Phase 5 area. But it begs the question, when you look at it, is what's trying to be accomplished here? Now, this, you can see it's a fairly large area that starts up here. It doesn't cover the yellow area, but it stops short there and then it comes down to here like this. It's a fairly large area. And that wasn't in any phase. That appeared nowhere before. And then you have 2E. So it is a Phase 2 area. It's all blue inside and just that little green for Phase 3 right there. This was actually originally intended to go to Joint Base Cape Cod. So you basically do have 4 quadrants in the town, north and south, east and west. And from a divide perspective, the eastern portions that we're looking at here would fairly easily fit into the existing system that we're building now.
A and B, you're saying now.
Right. And E does become different. Can it move over there? Yes. It would require pumps to move it and a force main to do so. Could be done, but that right there is about probably 220,000 gallons of flow. It's a large flow. And the plant wasn't intended to take Area 2E into it. So then, now, I've taken a look at this, which is, you've got your original plan, then what was presented to the selectmen here. So, something just changed on this map, and I know it wasn't noticeable, but you can see the town boundary line. Everything outside that boundary line, as far as the sewer service area, is now gone. All right, so I do this to try to show that if it was up to Mashpee to pick off all these areas, you're looking at a lot of money up there, a lot of money there, a lot of money there, and it's not even in Mashpee. And over here, that's a lot of money there, and that's in Falmouth. And over here, that's a lot of money, and that's in Barnstable. All of this is in Barnstable. So for clarity, on the left is what we're really looking at this point, because to engage in any of those other areas, you're going to have to work with the other towns. It's going to take intermunicipal agreements and a determination to move forward with that. So now I'm just going to proceed on a revised area here. 2A stayed the same. 2B stayed the same. 2C stayed the same. But here, I took out Sandwich. This was going further north, all right? So it included this area up here of Sandwich as part of that 2D sewer service area. Now, should that Sandwich area get done? Yes. But once again, from a phasing perspective, it's going to require an agreement, all right? Now, the concept for this, and I'll ask the chairman to correct me if I'm wrong, historically, the MEP or Mass Estuaries Project started in the 1990s, centered around estuaries.
Right.
That was it. It was a marine issue, all right?
Right.
This effort here, because if you say, well, why are we changing at all? Well, first of all plans changed to begin with. This thing started out in 2015. This is already 2022, okay? By the time you're ready for the next phase, it's going to be 2025, 26. So anyway, it does make sense here because for my purposes, with this being contiguous to the existing system and this being contiguous, and then this having the ability to connect into this, and this having the ability to come right down here, from a constructability perspective, it's a very cost-effective way to go. It achieves a lot of impact for the embayments, but that the goal was to shift these phases to try to start protecting the ponds as well. All right, because under the MEP program, there was no protection being afforded there. All right, they were taking a back seat to the other issue. Okay, so that's what this was intended to look at, was the town's effort of trying to do both at the same time. And in my opinion, you can. Now there's 2F down here. 2E is gone, and I say 2E is gone because it's a very big, costly endeavor over there. It is necessary, yes, but that's something that I think is more conducive to either going to the base and or even if it's possible to put, you'll see over here where it says back road, these three areas here, all right, in green, they're called the back road sites. Those sites were identified as potential plant/discharge sites. They're the backup if, for whatever reason, that flow never makes it to Joint Base Cape Cod. So it's an option to theoretically split the town in half so that you have a sewer system on each side, independent sewer systems, municipal level on both sides of the town. Don't have to do that, but to have that capacity go to the existing plant, you're going to have to expand the plant, as the chairman indicated earlier. And the 2F down there, this is an area below wind chimes, okay? But right here, right there is Mashpee River. It doesn't get more approximate than that. The effect of that discharge there is immediate with respect to the river, okay? It's in a position there, it was originally under the Phase 2 area anyway,
We have
but it was also intended as,
missing selectmen, but that, there's a potential that wind chime goes into the septic system of the commons. That's the logical place for it to be. There can be some leverage, there is political pressure, and they have the potential volume.
right,
So to leave that out for now, there are other issues involved.
okay. But
Moonshine.
it just seemed logical from a planning perspective, if the
Right.
town was going to start looking at it at all right? And this is just a very basic groundwater flow pattern, all right? In reality, wherever groundwater encounters a pond and/or a river, okay, it moves a little bit differently in or out of it, all right, but this is the general flow. And that's why I say just about everything up in Sandwich is ultimately impacts the ponds in Mashpee. And that was it.
We have an elephant in the room, and that's the fact that this whole new Phase 2 was to take advantage of two things. Hopefully, the availability of funds would become better under this new multi-trillion-dollar government,
The ARPA funds,
what is it called?
America Rescue Plan funds.
American Rescue Funds, okay. Well, it was hopeful that everybody would get money out of this, so we wanted to be first in line with a plan, you know. Now, the other thing was the concept, quote unquote, concept, that if we sewer around all these ponds, they'll clean up immediately. That may or may not be true.
Right.
All right. In the case of phosphorus, we're not getting a lot of phosphorus through our septic system into these ponds to cause it. Most of it was caused by runoff and the feeding of cranberry bogs. And there's a residual amount of phosphate which sits in the bottom of the ponds. And it's constantly regurgitating and also adding to the needs of the algae to grow. In fact, if you have a pond with no phosphorus in it, it's amazing. The algae never flowers, never becomes poisonous. But if the phosphate's there, bingo, it'll turn bad and make bad chemistry. So the whole idea that the town can take care of all of our polluted ponds by sewering is not an absolute fact of reality. However, I will go on record of saying it is, in my opinion, that part of the pollution in those towns is the migrating nitrogen from the surface waters that are coming out of septic systems. All right, because that nitrogen is flowing in those waters, along the surface, into Santuit, for example. We have two big hillsides full of houses, and everything flows downhill. You just can't get around that statement. So if we could stop the nitrogen going into Santuit, maybe the phosphorus nitrogen mix in that pond will clean up and not have the problems. And we may also stop the continuous erosion of the rest of our ponds in town by sewering around them. But that's not a guarantee. We have a guarantee of cleaning up our estuaries if we get the nitrogen out of our system. But it doesn't mean cleaning the nitrogen will fix our ponds. So just a word of caution.
That was it.
Thank you very much. This was a lot of effort on your part, and you are certainly a skilled communicator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? I have been on the sewer commission for a number of years, and it's time for me to move on. So I'm just saying, I think the sewer commission ought to have a meeting and discuss future chair and elect someone. So if anybody has anything to say, time to say it.
Did you want that discussion now? It's on the agenda, or did you
Yeah,
want to have it
sure.
later?
Let's discuss it.
Well, we're all new, a lot of us are new members. So, unless there's any question of seniority or procedure, I think it's an open ballgame. We're certainly all very fortunate to have your experience, and Meredith, you've been a big help to me getting to understand how we function and where we've been. And I've appreciated our conversations with both of you. I think any of us at this point are lucky to be exposed to our two, I would say 3 hours here, remaining members. But for lack of any other justification than how many people we have, I'm happy to volunteer in any capacity that the other members see fit.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Chad Smith for chairman of the Mashpee Sewer Commission.
Any seconds?
I could nominate Meredith to be chair of the sewer commission, too.
Well, let's deal with one at a time. Is there a second for Chad? I haven't heard one. So
I would-
now you're up. What?
Well, for similar reasons, maybe because she has a little more of experience on the sewer commission, I would nominate Meredith. She's pretty
Any
diligent
second?
about reviewing everything, and I would appreciate her leadership. I think we'd all benefit from it.
I don't hear a second.
Okay.
Can't take discussion if I don't have a second.
Maybe we need more time to talk about it.
Hmm?
Maybe we do need more time to discuss.
Okay.
I'm happy to serve under with any one of you, Meredith, Phyllis, and absolutely. So having gotten here, I'm just, I think we're all filling a need the town has, which is a functioning institution that people have faith in. It's a big ticket item. This is going to be the dominant subject going forward for many, many years. And the biggest thing I think we can do, and all of us can do it, is to provide that faith in this institution.
I agree, but I'd really like to thank Joe for all of what you've done for the sewer commission for all the years that you've been a part of it. So I hope that you will still stay a part of it. However, so that's what I wanted to say.
As a member of the public, I would encourage you to stay on a bit longer, perhaps not as chairman, because I have found your knowledge to be, your institutional knowledge and your accumulated knowledge is tremendous. There's not a lot of people on the board that can communicate directly with Mr. Jack here on a high level. So I appreciate you, and I hope you'll stay on a bit longer.
I can do that, but we'll keep the discussion of the chairperson on the agenda next time.
Okay.
Anything else? There wasn't any correspondence, although there was one email. But I gave you all a copy of it, so you all know about it. And it was someone expressing an opinion to bring Tom on board. I think I covered that before we started the meeting. So, anybody gonna close the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I motion that we adjourn.
Motion's made,
Second?
seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, I gotta go home and make fajitas for 6 people.